Hello, we're live.
Hello.
Hello.
Welcome everyone to the .NET Community Tooling Stand-Up, where we talk about tools, what's happening, Visual Studio Code, Visual Studio for Mac, all of the lovely things the community is building and the third-party stuff. Good morning.
Morning.
We have some awesome guests today. We're going to talk about WinForms WPF with hot reload, or maybe just WinForms. We'll see what demos work and what we're going to do. I'll introduce myself really quick. If you're new to the stream, I'm Kendra Havens. I am a program manager on the .NET and Visual Studio team. I work mostly on the testing experience in Visual Studio. Dmitry, I'll introduce you as the first guest. Or rather, please introduce yourself as the guest.
Sure, whatever
I'm going to
works.
get it wrong.
No problem. So hi, I'm Dmitry. I'm also a PM on the .NET team. I work alongside Kendra and other stuff. So my focus is on XAML tooling, hard reload technologies, and .NET MAUI. So those are 3 areas I work in.
Very cool. Tom, you're next.
Good morning. My name's Tom Meschter. I'm a software development engineer on what's called the .NET Project System team. And we sit in the middle of a lot of different features, including hot reload. So I'm excited for what we've got to show you today.
Awesome. So before we get into Dmitry and Tom's content, I just want to show a little bit of what's happening. There's a lot of cool blogs out. The migration of Bing's workflow engine to .NET 5. This is one of the cool ones that's come out. Bing does some insane things to get very, very good performance. Things that even scare us, like using nightly builds of .NET 5 that we haven't even run tests on. They do. It's an interesting read. They have some really, really interesting graphics that kind of show the complexity of the systems that they're working within. And yeah, I think a lot of it has some performance notes in that really, really impacted how the product runs. So exciting stuff. Mika also put out a really cool blog on what's new in productivity. We might actually have some people on the show in a later stream to show some of that stuff off if you haven't already seen it. Huge tooling improvements, showing the inheritance margin. We've got some GIFs that show how to navigate the inheritance chain just in the margin of Visual Studio, which is pretty nice. Removing unused references, that was a top thing. So there's a lot of really big stuff in this blog post. And we also have a blog post that talks about, I'll go ahead and put the URL list link in the chat. We have a blog post that talks about hot reload and how it works, but we also have the expert right here. So Dmitry, do you want to take it away?
Sure, sounds good. So you can show my screen so I can show people the blog post. So we shipped .NET Hot Reload in a really big way at Build, and I wrote up a blog post which hopefully gives you a sense of what's working and what the vision is. So to just summarize the vision in case you haven't looked at my blog post, it's basically this animated GIF. Like this animated GIF shares a lot of what we're trying to accomplish, which is you have a running application and you want to patch it with some code and you want to test the code without having to rebuild your app. We know that stopping debugging, restarting debugging can be fairly expensive for folks, and anything that keeps you in Visual Studio in the debug session keeps your app running basically at a high level. That's what we're trying to bring to you as a productivity improvement, and we're calling it .NET Hot Reload. It works using very powerful technology we've built over many years called Edit and Continue as a mechanism behind the scenes. But unlike Edit and Continue, which used to require you to stop at a breakpoint, this does not. And as you can see in this little animation here, I can zoom in, I guess, little blurry animation, is that you can just put your code in here, press the Hot Reload button, and test it through the application, and it will just work. So with that, I want to point out a couple of high-level things. We are trying to make this work in 3 scenarios. So today, most things that you consider as debugging features, they work through the debugger. So you have to F5 into your application. With Hot Reload, we're going to be making it available for the first time as something that's available as part of Control F5. So if you're in VS and you hit Control F5 and you're starting up without the debugger, that's sort of more lightweight approach, we're going to be making it available. This is something that wasn't available at Build. And in a little while, Tom's going to demo some really early bits of us getting that working. But what you could try at Build is use the debugger. So you could download 1611 and try everything you're seeing in this animated GIF from the F5 perspective, from the debugger perspective. And we also have CLI. So not only do we have Visual Studio F5 and Control F5 as our ambitions, we also have CLI as something that you can do. So if you have a .NET 6 application and you use .NET Watch and you set up your profile correctly, you will get Hot Reload through the command line. So you can even do it without Visual Studio. Of course, it's going to be best in Visual Studio 2022. We really are putting a lot of effort into features there. So I'm excited to see what you folks think about it. So with that, I'll show a quick demo. Let me switch out of the browser and go into Visual Studio. So here's Visual Studio 1611. This is the public preview that you have available to you today. This is not private bits of some sort that only work on my machine. You can go ahead and get this version. I'm even running an older preview than what's out. So this is preview 1 from back from Build. Preview 2 will work for this as well. And here I have a .NET MAUI app. So this is an app that we showed before. So I'll show it again. It's a good example. This is a WinUI app. So really cutting edge, newest technology. And it works here. And it works in your WinForms app. And it's going to work in your WPF app and your ASP.NET app. So what I'm showing it to you is WinUI because that's my demo. But this technology is being made available very broadly for your application as well, even console apps. Like it works everywhere. But let's take a look at this fancy WinUI demo. So in this demo, this is a great example of I have something that's visual. So I have this wind indicator, but I've actually forgot to implement the code that makes it show a random value. The reason why I'm using a random value is because in this demo app, there is no actual service to provide me wind data. But I want to see if this visualization is going to work, if this cursor is going to work around. So the app is running, the debugger is attached. I'm going to go into the code, and I'm going to look at where the code should have been setting the direction value, and it's not being set. It's being set to 0. So I'm going to uncomment some code here, and this code will give me a random direction value that's appropriate, and I'm going to implement the code up here in this method. And then the method itself is run on a timer. So behind the scenes right now, this method is executed every second or so. But because the original code only had 0 in the direction, this never got updated. So now I'm going to press the magic hard reload button that's up here in the UI. So here's our apply code changes button. And you click the button and you switch back to the application. Again, no restarting required. And this will start picking up the new value. The demo gods hate me today, don't they? What did I do? Oh, there it goes. Just took a few seconds. So demo gods, thank you very much for forgiving me all my sins. The indicator starts to work, and I never had to restart my application. I'm not even sure why that took a few seconds, but we're still working on the technology, so forgive us for any minor bugs. But then let's take a look at a bigger change that you can do, because it's fun to like add a new method and integrate the method into another method, but that's a relatively small change. Let's go do a bigger change. So I have a screen here that shows favorites, but right now it's not loading anything. And the reason is simple. I didn't implement the code to unload to actually load the data. So I'm going to uncomment this code. And there's nothing magical about uncommenting, right? I'm just saving the time of typing this in because this is a demo. In real life, you could have had a situation where you literally didn't have this code ready yet, but then your app is running and maybe your app takes a long time to start. So you're like, okay, I've got to implement the code. Normally, you'd have to stop debugging. Here, you can just implement the code, apply the code changes, and then you have to trigger the code changes, right? So there's no magic. This screen didn't update itself magically because the code is not going to get activated unless the constructor is called. And the way we do that in this particular application is I'm going to re-execute the code by re-navigating. So I'm going to re-navigate, and all of a sudden, there you go. I can see all of my weather information, all my favorites being loaded. And I'm even going to show us a little bug that's in here, right? So if you notice, it's Redmond in each one. That's not right. Like, why is it showing Redmond? I obviously favorited a lot of things. They're not all Redmond. So I'm going to go into my code, and here is a very common bug. Come on, who hasn't done this? You have a nice little for loop here, and then at element at, you put 0 instead of I. Like, this has really happened to me in the real world. I'm guilty. So I'm going to put an I in here. I'm going to hit apply code changes, go back to the app, re-execute the code one more time. And now it's going to show the correct locations that I favorited. So these were 3 edits that I was able to do without ever having to restart the application. Now imagine having to restart the application. Each time you'd find a bug. I find that this feature is very productive, even in my own kind of small scale app development, but we know that some real world applications take 5, 10, 20 minutes to build and restart. So if we can save you restarting, we know that's going to be a huge help. And even in smaller apps, I find it just to be very productive. Now, there are some things that we don't support today in terms of edits. Those things are being worked on. We are trying to reduce the number of things we don't support at runtime. And if you do a change that's not supported, you're going to get a dialog in Visual Studio that says, sorry, this change isn't supported. You've got to restart your application. And we're going to give you a little restart button there. So you'll be able to go in there, click restart, and your app will restart for you, or you can manually restart it. And over time, hopefully that set will get smaller. So that's kind of my high-level overview. And with this, I would think Tom has a really cool demo to show you what we're working on next that we're going to release in some future update.
Yeah, absolutely. So I have a much hotter demo than Dmitry did. This is coming in. This is very, very recent work. Let me load it up here.
It's so recent that even I have not seen Tom demo this. This is just how cutting edge it is.
I'm not sure I've seen this demo. It's yeah, very hot. So I just have here a WinForms app targeting .NET 6, running in VS 2022. And so Dmitry showed running under a debugger, but the same functionality is going to be available to us when you're not running under a debugger. So I'm just going to, for example, start this app without debugging, what we call the Control F5 scenario. And it's going to build this tiny little Windows app, which not super interesting, but just cycles through some colors as I click the buttons. But it looks to me like it's only cycling through about 4 colors. That doesn't seem quite right. So let's come over here. Oops. Oh, well, there's my problem. I'm only changing the green value. Okay, well, what if we want to do something a little bit more interesting? Just throw some random numbers in there. And now I don't even need to save. I can just click the Apply Code Changes button there. And if everything has worked, or maybe everything didn't work. Oh, wait, no, it did. Yeah, now we've got somewhat more colors. Or we can make it really obvious by updating the red value as well.
Yeah, very cool.
Wow, there we go. And you're not even
So this
debugging
is,
right now. The app's just running.
I'm not even debugging. The app's just running. You didn't have to wait for the debugger to attach or to load symbols or anything like that. Didn't have to save. You just click the button and keep going.
Apply changes. Wow.
Yep.
So, and it didn't look like it did a build to apply any of this. So it's kind of the same thing that we saw, like while we're in edit and continue, it's some kind of incremental step inserting new, the new code, I guess.
It's just updating this method with a new version of that. And the next time it gets called, that's what gets run.
Amazing.
Yeah, we're really
So
excited
cool
for
to see
Controller
this.
5. We know lots of people use it in their real world apps. You know, they like the productivity of it, sort of quickly launch their application. And what Tom is working on with the rest of the team is really going to improve things. We're hoping it's coming soon. We'll see. No promises in the version, but it's in the works.
So everything Dmitry showed with the console app and web UI and what else? MAUI kind of apps. Those you didn't show those, but those all work in hot reload so far. I was really amazed that all of that stuff came on board so quickly. And we're working on WinForms and WPF, and so this isn't available, but we're working on it. It's getting there for sure, I guess.
Or even console apps, if that's your thing.
Yeah.
Console apps, yes.
Yeah, the best way to think about it is like today with 16.11, you're getting F5, and F5 works for pretty much everything. It works for MAUI with WinUI, it works with WPF, WinForms, console. I've tested it with like Azure functions, like it works with Azure functions. Again, it's just .NET code being patching methods. So it works very broadly. And what's coming is Controller 5, right? So we're sort of like talking, the way we internally talk about this stuff is the experience, right? The F5 experience is kind of almost done. The Controller 5 experience is very much on Tom's machine at the moment and a few other people. We're getting there. And CLI is fairly baked. The one challenge we're still having, because I like to be transparent, is there's a bunch of things around Razor technology that we're still working through. Razor it's actually very complicated to hard reload. I think in this last preview at Build, we had it working through the CLI, and the Visual Studio experience was having some challenges. It wasn't because it's Visual Studio, but because we're trying to do it through the debugger, which is just a different set of code we have to patch. So we are working on it. Like by release, it's going to work in parity 100%. And Visual Studio, we'll have the flexibility of F5 and Controller 5 for web and desktop, client, as we call it, developers as well. So yeah, exciting. And people ask me, does it work with XAML hard reload for XAML applications? And the answer is yes, with the caveat that for Controller 5, we're probably not going to have XAML hard reload ready in time for this release. We're trying. I mean, if we get there, great. But F5, everything will work the way you expected. So if you F5 into like a WPF app, you can change XAML to change your UI code, and you can use .NET hard reload to change your C# code. There's even places where VB is supported. So if you have a VB application, VB.NET app, if it's something that Edit and Continue supports today, hard reload will support it as well. So this is not a C# only feature. In fact, that's why we kind of call it .NET hard reload. It's because it is slightly broader than just C#. But certainly C# is where it works, and the majority of the cases work around C# today.
Super cool. So we got a question from chat on WinForms. Can we change the button location?
We are aware of that scenario. There was some code that was committed that should make that possible, but the challenge we have today is that the WinForms designer is not available when the app is running. And it's not insignificant for us to make that available. And it opens up a lot of user experience questions. So it's on the list. There's other things that we have to prioritize right now because the team has to kind of make the core of the technology work. But who knows? Let's see how far we can go. This is still on the question mark list from my perspective as a PM, but it's definitely on the radar. So I think what might be possible at GA is that you might be able to do it if you change the code behind that's generated by the WinForms designer yourself. And if we get really lucky, maybe we can get the WinForms designer working at runtime, but I wouldn't bet on it yet, basically.
Mm. Even if you were trying to change the button location with code, we're not there yet?
Yeah. Oh yeah, if it's code, it should work, right? Like I think I'm interpreting the question, right? I think that there's two possibilities. You have your default layout sort of that the designer designs, like the designer says the button is in the top right, and you start the app and the button's in the top right. Well, can you move the button to be
drag it and then actually
somewhere else? Yeah. So that's the scenario. Now, if you have code that at runtime changes stuff, if you change the code and you re-execute the code, it'll definitely change the behavior.
Interesting. I was hoping. Okay, cool. So not quite, but we're thinking about it. There's a lot of different scenarios we could cover. Very cool.
Yeah.
I had a question. What was it? Oh, I was kind of curious. How did hot reload start? So we kind of I saw .NET Watch technologies and I was very, very impressed with it, kind of triggering a rebuild and relaunch and refresh on any kind of code change or on a file save or something like that. Did that spark more of this discussion? But those two things are just kind of linked into my head of why don't we just like build that into all of our tools? Was kind of what I was thinking.
Yeah, so there's a lot of history here. I'll try to make it the briefest possible explanation. And by all means, I have a perspective of what it was from my perspective, right? Some other people might have a different perspective. The team is very large, and there's been a lot of technology that's been worked on. But where I live in the .NET MAUI kind of Xamarin world, I think it was almost 2 years ago when we prototyped the hot reload technology for C# for a Xamarin application internally. So this demo sparked the desire to actually bring this technology to market for real for customers. And when .NET 6 planning started, one of the really cool things that happened that really benefited us was this idea that management said, look, let's find ways to improve developer productivity, like in their inner loop, right at the core. And we knew we had a demo that worked for us. So we started talking to various people, and this came up, like the ASP.NET scenario you described came up as well. And we're like, okay, we have different ideas of how to do this, but how do we do this broadly? And the conversation evolved over time, and we basically landed with this notion of like, why not build this for everybody? Let's not worry if you're a web developer or a MAUI developer or a WPF app, can we make this generic enough that it'll benefit the broadest number of .NET developers? Because that's what we do on the .NET team. Like we try to give as many of you a benefit as possible, and we were lucky enough that we had kind of the people and the tools and the time to give it a shot. And here we are. I think it's like 6 months later. Where at build we shipped something that delivered on a big part of that promise. So I'm so excited. We have a huge team that's working on this, like huge. I can't even mention, like 10 internal teams are working on this within developer division.
I was so impressed how many different project types we reached so quickly. I think that really showed that like we didn't even really like need to motivate the developer teams. They were like self-motivated, like, oh, I want my stuff to work for that. And they went out and started using the hot reload stuff. Very cool.
Definitely. We have support from everybody. We have such great people, the debugger team, the Roslyn team, runtime teams, the MAUI ASP.NET team. My meetings are very big, but very productive.
Yep. We got another question. Will hot reload be finally available with Project Reunion WinUI?
So what I just showed was a WinUI app, like a second ago, right? My demo was a WinUI app. And what I want to point out is that this technology works today with WinUI. So if you install 16.11 and you go ahead and you just, let's ignore MAUI for a second, you just open a WinUI app. it will work, but you've got to do one thing. You've got to turn on the manage debugger. By default, the templates turn on a mixed mode debugger. We do not support mixed mode debugging and hard reload during the .NET 6 release. So for now, unfortunately, you have to choose one or the other. And if you go into your MSIX packaging project, into properties, there's a setting in there for which debugger to use. So if you flip that to be managed, hit F5, start changing your code, press the button, it'll work. Today,
Nice.
like it works already.
Absolutely. So I think, does the whole question fit on the screen? Yeah. I think this is also just more about, is it going to be working for most .NET scenarios? And I think we're kind of saying, yes, a lot of things are already coming online.
Yeah, I totally get where this question is coming
we agree
from.
it's very common. Oh.
Yeah, we've had this question come up before. It's like, what is the purpose of this technology? Is it to support UI developers? There certainly are developers that use code behind to generate UI, and for them, this is useful, 100%. Are we making it for them? No, that's not the goal, right? In fact, we're not prioritizing them specifically at all. It just works for them. We basically have two things that you have to consider always. Is the change you're making a supported change? Okay, check. If that's a check, can the code be re-executed from the application through like a timer or a button click or some action, right, that you can take? If those two things are true, then your change will be something that you can truly hard reload and get a benefit from. If you change like a constructor in a page that's already loaded and there's no way in the UI code to reload that page to re-trigger the constructor, then the hard reload will succeed, but actually won't provide you any benefit. So that's the one limitation we can't do anything about in this release. Like you just have to know, you know, your code isn't like we can't figure out some magical way to rerun every piece of code that you change. But if you change code and you do rerun it somehow, like I showed, right, with a timer and a button click, then yes, we can change it. So here's one example. If you have some sort of class that's designed to call a web service behind the scenes, right? And you have a refresh button, and every time you press the refresh button, it refreshes the UI, but it also calls this class to see if there's data available at the server. So you can go and change the server class. That this isn't UI specific technology. You can go ahead and change the server class to return different data to your UI. You can then use XAML hard reload as an example, if it's a XAML app, to change what the UI looks like based on that result. So you can actually mix those things together and change all sorts of code.
Yeah,
it's not UI specific.
Yeah, so long as you're running .NET 6 or something that supports hot reload, you will get some amount of support for hot reload in your app. Now, in different UI frameworks may need additional framework-specific help from the tooling to do the right thing. But in general, yeah, we want it to be everywhere.
Yeah, I was wondering about this question. So it's about someone creating a new open source UI framework. Actually, like things like Telerik come to mind, and like I was kind of thinking the .NET kind of UI frameworks that help a lot of people out. Maybe what's the other big one? Orchard Core or something like that. I'm thinking they would all already work with hot reload where it's already supported today.
Yeah, 100%. This isn't about Microsoft frameworks, right? This is about .NET. If you have a .NET app, it doesn't matter who wrote it, whether it's Telerik wrote it, Microsoft, or you wrote it yourself as an independent developer. As long as you can change the code, you can hard reload the code, and as long as the code can be re-executed by your app, you'll see those changes without having to restart. That's really the rules. The rules of this game are very simple, right? Like some video games out there are, require you to learn 50 buttons to play correctly. This video game requires only a couple of basic rules and a button. Those rules are simple, and if you can do it, then you're good to go. Of course, what certain frameworks could do is make their code friendlier to hard reload as an experience, right? Like the end-to-end. So maybe they take things out of constructors and put them behind click behind calls or something. Like you could change your coding pattern slightly to make hard reload a bit more accessible. But at the end of the day, like I don't recommend that too much. Like you should build your code the way you want to run it in production. Hard reload will help you. Let us know where it's not helping you. We'll try to find ways to make it easier. But it's very flexible. Like we don't put a lot of restrictions beyond that.
Very cool. And okay, I think the questions are slowing down a little. I think we have one more exciting demo. Dmitry, is that true?
Yeah,
We want to do
yeah, we
that?
do. Sure. So Tom inspired me. So I didn't even know Tom wanted to be on this stand-up. And then I heard from Kendra that Tom's going to show Controller 5, and I'm like, amazing! This is super hot of bits that only work on Tom's machine. I love those demos. So then I was like, I can do that too. I have a demo that only works on my machine. Well, me and one other person at Microsoft today. So let's
Wow.
look at my screen real quick. So here, and I'm assuming we're sharing what I'm
Yes,
showing.
it is.
Okay.
It's live now.
Okay, cool. Sorry, I had to minimize the browser, so I'm not seeing it. So
Yep.
here we have an application which is a WPF app. I'm using a preview version of Visual Studio 2022. This is coming in a future version of Visual Studio 2022. It's not available today, so there's no preview. Like if you install some version of Visual Studio 2022 when it comes out, it's not going to be there yet. Like this is in a future version, like not the version we're going to ship closer to now, but the version we're going to ship further away from now. So be patient, it'll be there soon. So this feature is all about productivity on a single screen device. When I'm presenting, I'm actually on a single screen device for all intents and purposes. This is the machine people can see, so I have to do everything on this machine. So if I'm to demo to you XAML Hot Reload, I've got to make both my app and Visual Studio available on this machine. But we also know lots of customers work on laptops, either part-time or full-time. And in those situations, they often don't have a second display. So this is actually real world for people beyond just me demoing things. But let's imagine that I want to make my life a little bit better. So here, I'm going to show you XAML Hot Reload. I'm going to go and select an element to change. So I want to change this email label. And now I'm going to go ahead and change it, and oh, okay, my app just disappeared, right? That's not great. I want to be able to show you my app in real time. So I'm going to go back up to the main window, and I'm going to be, okay, I'm going to use this trick that only works in WPF. I can do topmost. So now my app is always going to be visible. Okay, that's cool. Let's try this again. I'm going to go to my label, and I'm going to show you how amazing XAML Hot Reload is by making the font really big. Okay, that's cool. I'm going to go back here, and I'm going to make this font back to the default. Okay, that's cool. It's making changes in real time. But again, it's not ideal. I have to have my app open. I have to move it around. And what if my app is a full screen application? Then this really doesn't work, right? Like it's not a great experience. So we want to make it a better experience for you. So let's make this app bigger the way I always intended, big enough that it wouldn't be practical in a single screen scenario. And I'm going to go back to my main window, and I'm going to remove this topmost flag. And I'm going to show you this cool new feature we're working on. So I'm going to go to search, and I'm going to enable a new window called Live Preview for XAML. And with Live Preview for XAML, we are making it so that you can go ahead and put your running application inside of Visual Studio as a dockable window. So here I can see my application, and I can go ahead and do element selection back in my email field, and I can change the email label. I can change that. I can go ahead and I can go to my list view down here, and I can actually take the list view out completely and see what that looks like. I can put it back, and I'm doing all of this from Visual Studio with the application window and the code window docked side by side. As you can see right here, it's actually attaching to my application. So this is a live view of the app that is running here in the background. You can see as I'm interacting with both of them, they're both changing. Yeah, so it is real-time communication through a Windows API. I cannot interact with the app here, so I still have to switch to my app to interact with it. But once I interact with it, I can switch back here, and I can actually make XAML changes, and it will reflect it in real time. The other thing that we're adding is rulers to this kind of view. So you can actually, you can imagine a world where you're doing pixel perfect kind of applications by making sure that based on your red lines, everything is 100% correct and the sizes are right, etc. And you can do it all with zooming. So you can zoom in, you can see if things are aligned or not down to the pixel. As you can see, I'm actually a little bit off in my alignment of the borders here, so that's something I can work on. And you can change XAML as you do this. So if I go here and I go back to the employee label, even if I'm super zoomed in, I can start making changes to XAML. I can see what it looks like without the label. Does it change it, etc. But basically, this is technology we're calling XAML Live Preview. We're super excited about it, and we hope you give it a try when it becomes available.
Awesome. That is so, so, so cool. Yeah, that'll be really, really impactful. I feel like it's so, but do you plan to be able to enable the interactions and maybe like even hide the actually running app or?
Yeah, it's we have some ideas, some more expensive than others to implement. Right now, this was a really practical way to bring this feature forward using an API that already exists in Windows. Today, that API doesn't allow interactivity, so the future is always there's always
Oh, we're
possibilities in the
programmers.
future. Yeah,
We
we can
can do
always
anything
ask.
we want.
Yeah, so we'll see how it goes. But the
Right?
first release will not have interactivity. We have to cut that from the feature list. But
Sure.
yeah,
Still very, very cool. So very nice features, some excitement. We got this is fantastic. So do rulers have magnetics or snapping in this yet?
not in my build. We are thinking about it. We've spent an enormous amount of time thinking about rulers and snapping, and which values to show in the tooltips and all of that stuff. It's going to evolve over time. What I'm showing you is such an early preview that one of my devs told me this morning it was available, and I got so excited I risked patching Visual Studio to show it to you. But it's certainly early enough that it's what I'm showing you is not the complete experience. We'll have a lot more to say about it when the first release is fully available. At that time, we'll do a blog which describes like all the features we're planning to ship with GA, what's available in the first preview, and by then we'll hopefully have a better sense of like what we can get done in time, right? I mean, everything takes time, so we have to cut scope often. But yeah, rulers are going to have all sorts of fun features. Hopefully, snapping will make it.
Very cool. That's just amazing. Thank you so much for showing the very edge bits. It's just cool to see what's coming and what we're thinking about. Is there any final messages you want to leave our crowd with?
Go try .NET Hard Reload in 16.11. That's my number one message. People like DM me on Twitter all the time. They're like, which version is it in? I'm like 16.11. Like, it definitely is not there if you install any other version of Visual Studio, period. So if you get 16.11 preview 1 or 2, you have Hard Reload. And when we make more available, there'll be blogs on the .NET and Visual Studio blog. So keep an eye on those.
Sweet. Well, thank you both so much for joining. It was a pleasure having you on the stream. You guys have your Twitter handles on the stream if people want to bug you more, or they could leave comments on our blogs or engage with our teams probably on our open source repos and all of that good stuff.
Yeah,
absolutely.
Cool. Yeah. So, well, thank you all for joining. I'll let everyone go for the day.
Great. Thank you, Kendra. We appreciate you having us on. Have a good day, everybody. Thank you for watching.
Later.